All right, thank you. So this is our fourth presentation on our Teams series, and probably one of the most important, because this one is governance and security. And these are all the things you need to think about before you start your Teams implementation. So let's just jump right in with our agenda. So I'm just going to do some high-level discussion on the areas you need to think about before you start rolling out Teams. And then I'm actually going to jump out of PowerPoint and do some demonstration to show you how some of these things work when you have them set up. There's some neat things that I'm going to demo, and you'll hopefully get a kick out of them. So jumping right in. I think I like this slide because Microsoft touts Teams as its hub for collaboration, and that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. It's chat, it's collaboration, it's meetings, it's voice. But how does all that stuff work together behind the scenes? And I don't know that everyone realizes, right, that chats are stored in Exchange Online, and files are stored in SharePoint Online. If you share a file in a chat, that file is stored in OneDrive for Business. So you have all these powerful tools behind the scene. How do you control all of that data? And so Microsoft has their whole suite of tools for Office 365 that, they've been in place for a long time. And you can use all of those things to leverage protecting your data in Teams. So I just really like this slide because it kind of shows how the data flows and where it's stored and what kind of controls you have. So next up, we have a poll question. So do you have any applications where users have administrative access? In my previous life, I worked for a school district, and it was a fine line between giving people access, enough access to do what they needed to do, but not too much access. So teachers are notorious for finding crazy applications and websites that have all these unique requirements. And so we worked hard to give them enough access that they could do what they need to do, but not too much access. And that's that fine line. Teams by default, users all have the ability to create sites. And so if you don't think about that before you get started, so for the most part, it looks like the answer is no, but still a good portion, yes. And so Teams would be an example here of a application where people do have more rights than you typically would see. So if a user has the ability to create a site and you don't have some kind of governance over that or a policy in place, it's Teams Sprawl. That's one of the first things we're going to talk about. So why do you need governance? Sprawl. You could have hundreds of or thousands of sites created. If you don't have a way to control expiration of those sites, they'll be there forever. Do you know who the owner is, who the creators are, who are members? Do you know how your data is being backed up? Do you have a naming convention for those sites? Do you need to have guest access? That's people outside of your organization accessing data in your Teams site. Have you considered third-party applications? We're up to about 600. And how does this all work, with a mobile application? Because one of the advantages of Teams is it's available on the desktop. It's available via the web. It's got a mobile application, and all of those are a great way to access that information. So, what tools do we have in place to control all of these things? So I did on this slide was kind of put together a list of tools that Microsoft provides that can address all of those things from that previous slide. So archiving a Teams site, setting up a moderator, enabling auditing, data loss prevention, retention, right? Who's going to go through that list of 600 apps and decide which ones are allowed? So you have all of these pieces that can be configured to help you control your data in Teams. So I want to start with just the first and the most simplest concept is creating sites. Currently, Teams allows you to have duplicate names. It can get confusing in a hurry. So you need to think about things like a naming convention. And there are some tools that can actually help with that. Because Teams sites are based on Office 365 groups, you can create a policy that will enable a prefix or suffix. So in my demo, my user is part of the manufacturing department. And so anytime he creates a site, there's a prefix of marketing _ and then whatever he chose to call that site. You can do, if you have multiple locations, you could do a suffix that would be location. So it would be marketing _ the name of the site, and then Chicago. So some tools that are there by default that will let you control this. So if you don't have a policy in place, you're going to end up with a situation like this, where you have the HR site, the human resources sites, and the official HR site. Which is the actual site? Your users are going to have to figure that out. And then here's another example of the duplicate naming, where there's two sites with the exact same name, which is the real site. So some decision points. So naming we talked about. Classifications is another tool that Microsoft has that lets you assign some more specific conventions to a site. You could do things like a low impact, medium impact, or high impact, or internal, external, confidential, or highly confidential. And so the combination of a classification and rules like data loss prevention or retention and legal hold can allow you to control information that is put into a team site. So if it's an internal site and you've labeled it internal, maybe that's okay to share certain information. But if it's external, right, well, we're not going to share any credit card or social security or personal information on any of our sites that are external. But if it's internal, then maybe that would be okay. And so classifications lets you do that. And the last thing on the list here is guest access. So guests in Teams actually become a member of your Azure AD. And so you have a lot more control over what they can do. So they're not anonymous, like when you do a meeting and you just send a link out, anyone can join that meeting. You can actually create guest access with, so they're going to have to log in using their Microsoft account, and then you'll be able to control what they can do within your environment. Well, there's a lot of steps to get that configured properly. So moving on, expiration. So this is a great way to control Teams sprawl. So you let your users create sites, but you can say every year the sites are going to expire, and if they don't renew them, then they're going to be deleted. It's not deleted, they're deleted. You have 30 days to recover them, or you can put in place retention policy or a legal hold that will hold that information indefinitely. So you have a lot of control there. But that notification, it's at 30 days, 15 days, and 1 day, you get an email. And it just says, right, are you still using this site? Do you want to renew it? And so it's just a great way, you know, it's spring cleaning. Once a year we go through and we expire our sites. So I think I talked about all of these. Oh, the last one on this list is archiving. So an additional option that you have, if you want to, you worked on a project, the project's complete, you don't want to delete the site because it still has good information on it, but you don't want anybody adding to it or changing it. You can archive a Teams site. And the neat thing is that the information on that site is still searchable, and you could even go and unarchive that site if you needed to. So I'll actually show that in my demo. It's pretty neat. So here's what it would look like if you had a site that was going to expire. So in the settings of that site, you have this button down here called Renew Now. And then I actually set it up in my demo environment. So one of my HR sites is set to expire today. And so I actually clicked renew. But this is what the email looked like that my user got. And so there was one at 30 days, one at 15 days, and one that was actually today. So features in Teams. So features can mean a couple different things. Features are things like chat, calling, meetings, sites. You can control that at an organizational level or at an individual level. I had worked with a customer that wanted to use Teams meetings with counselors and clients. And they didn't want to schedule every individual appointment. They wanted to have just an open meeting where they could let people wait in the lobby, just like they would in an office, and then they could admit them when their last session had ended. And so when we were testing this, we found out that anytime a person was admitted to a meeting, a notification was posted in that meeting's chat of who had entered the meeting. And I said, well, you could just have them, right, just use a fake name or something when they were, right, joining the meeting. And they're like, we couldn't really trust them to do that. So what we were able to do is for that group of counselors, we created a user policy that disabled chat. So now they can schedule meetings. They're just an open reoccurring meeting. They can set up one invite, and then people join, and they sit in the lobby, and then the organizer, the counselor of the meeting can kick the person out when they're done, and then let the next person in. So just a way to control features at an organizational level or at individual user level. And so for all of these areas, what you really need to do is document what your policies are going to be. You need to plan that all out and communicate that. So that's something that we have helped several organizations with, kind of why we're putting this webinar series together to share our expertise with our customers. So that's the first three areas. Now let's get into some of the meat of it. So when it comes to security and compliance with Teams, these are the big areas that we like to talk about: EDiscovery, data loss prevention, mobile applications, and multi-factor authentication. So any EDiscovery rules that you have in your Office 365 environment can be used in your Teams environment. So I enabled some in my demo tenant, and I get a regular email because there's some information in the demo tenant that is considered confidential. So there's some, I think, credit card numbers in one of their demo files. And so I get this email, I think, once a week as EDiscovery runs, and it looks through all that information. So you can use the rule that is detecting that is the data loss prevention rule. So data loss prevention is looking, and I'll show you that as well, some of the things I've configured there, and it's reporting back to EDiscovery. And then you can take all this right further with mobile application management, controlling who can access and what devices can access. Do I want multi-factor set up on those devices? So just a ton of control. So let me jump out here and just show some of these things off. So I'm going to start with, I have a user logged in here, and this is my demo site. So I'm going to create a Teams site. So just a little orientation for you that haven't seen this before. This is Teams, and I'm logged in via a web browser. This is the app bar. So these are where the apps are. These are my Teams sites. So I just have 3 showing. I got a bunch hidden. So within each team site, you have what are called channels. And then every channel has what are called tabs. So I just compare it to a file cabinet. So, right, this would be your file cabinet, the channels would be the drawers, and the tabs would be the folders. So I'm going to create a new site. I'm going to build it from scratch. I'm going to make it public, and I'm going to call it Mark 8. So if you notice, right below this, it has already added the prefix of manufacturing underscore to my site, and I didn't have to do anything. So if I create that site, so when you're creating a site, the first thing you should do is add at least one other owner. I'm going to make him an owner so that if a person leaves the organization, you have at least one person as a backup. There's a way to do that administratively, but it's just best practice to make sure you have 2 owners for all your sites. So what I did here was I actually created another manufacturing Mark 8 site, which is exactly the same as the one I already had. So just to let you know, you can have duplicate names. So let me edit this real quick. So if I edit, down here is where the classification shows up. So the team is classified as internal. And so just hovering over this information marker here shows me my options. So it's internal, external, confidential, or highly confidential. So I'm going to actually change this one to be highly confidential. Oops, missed. So now I create a site and I classified it. So let me show you the archiving. So if I do a search, so I come up here to my command bar, and I'm just going to search for press release. By default, when you search, it searches messages, but I'm interested in files. And so the first thing that shows up here is the press release, and it's in the Digital Initiatives Public Relations Teams site. So if I come back to Teams, I look, it's not here. I look at my hidden teams, it's not here either. So what I can do is come down here to Manage Teams and show Archived, and here's my Digital Initiatives Public Relations. So I was able to search for a document that was stored in this site that's been archived. And I could unarchive this site from right here. So if this is something that we needed to reactivate, we could do that. But it's a good way to, project's over, we've taken it offline, but the information's still there and it's still accessible. So expiration. So just quickly, because again, Teams sites are based on Office 365 groups, here's where you would go in your admin center under groups and expiration. And so I just did a custom for 60 days. I put a contact in here. So if the owner didn't respond, there would still be someone here that would get these notifications. And you could do all of your sites, or you could select specific sites. So I just did a couple to test. So just to kind of show you what that would look like. And then the next area I want to show you here is data loss prevention. So this is not specific to Teams. This is just generic Office 365. And so I think I set up this one here, the US personally identifiable information. And so I created this and I added, there are a lot of options. So you can, if it's a low hit, so if there was one instance of it, or if there was a lot. So if there were hundreds, you can handle that data differently. I cranked everything up. So I made it as restrictive as I could. So I can show you an example of how that would look. So let's say my user, Lee, in the manufacturing market 8 project wants a laptop order. So he posted in the general information here, please order this laptop for me. Here's my social security number and my credit card number. So I've just posted this. And now the data loss prevention rules are going to run in the background. We should see here in a second information coming back that this is not allowed. We'll just have to give it a minute. It may be because the site is new. I'll try it in this other site too. Do the same thing here. Because that site is so new, it may handle it differently. It worked yesterday. Try one more time. And if not, we'll come back to it. So just some other things to consider. Expiration, who has the ability to control those things. Global administrators, group administrators, user administrators have that ability. When you're creating, the best way to control who can create sites is to control who can create Office 365 groups. So that's how you control Teams site creation. And even then within the site, who has the ability to renew a site, restore one that's been archived. So that would be owners. They're the ones that have that permission. Try it one other place. See, there it was. It did work. So that's what it would look like. So this is my demo environment. Things don't always work 100%. There it is. So this message was blocked. What can I do? You can configure this. You could let someone release the information if they had authority to do so. Right now, your only option is to report it. So I've used these rules before in Exchange. So when I used to work for a school district, our business office had a common practice of emailing documents with social security numbers in them. And so I put in a data loss prevention rule. Anytime there was a document with a social security number in it, I got an email, and then I would go and have a conversation and tell them they can't do that. So we started, and we were just seeing it in the business office, but then when it was W-2 time, our teachers would get their W-2s, download them, and email them to their spouses. I'm like, you're sending an unencrypted email with your social security number in it. You can't do that. So that's the demo stuff I had to show. I'm going to jump back in here and kind of talk about, the big picture. So these are all the things that you need to think about before you roll Teams out. So we talked about the naming convention with prefix and suffix. You could even have custom words that are blocked. So if there are things you don't want sites called. Controlling who has the ability to create the Teams sites. You have to have the ability to create a SharePoint site, an Office 365 group. So you have to have all that configured properly. The expiration, setting it up, before you get started, so that sites are set up to expire automatically. Guest access, these are, I think, the 4 areas you really need to look at to make sure guest access is working properly. The policies we touched on, retention in legal hold, you can use the same policies you have in place for your Office 365 environment on Teams. So something got deleted, you would have a policy there that would retain that information. We kind of talked about EDiscovery and data loss. Templates is something that is getting better. So currently you can create a site based off of an existing site. And so when on one of our earlier webinars, I showed an example of a customer site that we set up internally, and I was just able to create additional sites based off that initial one. Microsoft is working on the ability to have some pre-configured sites, like an HR site or a marketing site. And so it'll make that whole process easier. And then monitoring. So there's a lot of different ways to see what's going on with your Teams deployment. The Teams Admin Center's got a good dashboard. You can also look at SharePoint. There's a great Power BI report that Microsoft created that lets you look at all of Office 365, and specifically it looks at, I look at the Teams part of it, so you can see who's using it for chat and files. So, big picture of all the things you need to consider before you roll out your Teams. So, how can we help? We've done several envisioning and readiness sessions with customers. We kind of talk about what the capabilities are of Teams. We'll demo use cases and talk about all the features. I think this is left over from another presentation where we were talking about remote access. One thing I didn't mention yet was Skype is going away. So it's just about a year now. Skype will be end of life, and you will, if you are a Skype user, then your only option will be Teams. So just these are some of the things that we can do to help you. I've done many sessions where I have sat down with customers and gone through all the settings in the Teams admin console. There's about 90 different settings that need to be reviewed before you're ready to roll Teams out. So it's about an hour and a half, 2 hours to go through them all and get things configured the way you want them. Apparently things go a lot faster when Bruce isn't here. So there's usually 2 of us doing this, and it was just me today, so I think I went a little quicker. So coming up, the next thing we have on our calendar at Peters is this month in cybersecurity next week. And that's all I had for the presentation today. If there are any questions, I would be happy to try to answer them.